Frak Slitherbottom was introduced in Season 2 Part 2 of Dragon's Rising, and with every installment since he has been a main staple, and every single time we've seen him, I've also changed my opinion on him. I've never really been able to isolate how I feel about this character, and the last time I talked about him on this channel, I wasn't overly positive about him. I was talking mainly about his Season 3 antics, where I just really didn't feel like there was too much going on for him. But it does feel like with the release of Season 4, he's definitely back on track, and honestly has slowly but surely become one of my favourites. But his journey to get here has certainly been interesting, and I honestly look back at it and I realise that we've been on a very complicated relationship when it does come to this character. I feel like when you look at him in retrospect, you see all of the breadcrumbs that we now understand, and I think that is absolutely amazing. So what I want to do today is actually take a look back at Frak, take a look at every instance that we have seen him, and just kind of look over his highs and lows, and just give an understanding to this character, because it truly does feel like he deserves it, especially after Season 4 Part 1. So, let me not waste any more of your time, and let's talk about how we can try to understand Frak. Like I said, we were introduced to him in Season 2 Part 2. He was a part of the Wolf Clan. He had the elemental power of Quake, and Raz was essentially teaching him in the ways of anger. We got to see him harness his abilities through Raz's teachings, and it was very interesting because Frak by all accounts didn't see any sort of issue with it. He actually remarked that Raz was a good master, and he taught him a lot to do with his elemental abilities. So it genuinely didn't seem to think that Frak didn't think what he was doing was bad. But as the tournament does progress, we get to see Frak interact with some of the ninja, we get to see the ninja also interact with Frak in some really fun ways. I do particularly like Frak's interactions with Cole in Season 2 Part 2, especially when Cole is directing him on how to utilize his elemental powers of Earth. I just really appreciate those little details, and it definitely did set up a lot of hope when it did go to Frak moving forward. But Frak was just slowly but surely coming around to the ninja. He was seeing that they were honestly really cool. It did seem to be that Raz was implanting poisonous drippings when it did come to them, and it seemed to be why Frak was a little hesitant, but Frak was most definitely breaking through. But this breakthrough did manifest itself in honestly one of Frak's best scenes, and one that does feel recontextualized with Season 4. His fight with Sora, where he holds up the wolf mask and Raz is shouting at him to put it on and to embrace shattering his own goodness, Frak refuses, and he loses the fight fairly. And he remarks at the fact that he lost fair and square, and that was that. He just simply wasn't going to use the mask. And Raz, to say the least, was not happy with this. But it did truly feel like Frak was being his own person, being his own individual, and that was just really cool to actually see. All of this culminated with Frak eventually actually turning against Raz and helping the ninja towards the end, and this actually led through to the ninja recruiting Frak onto the ninja team. They saw the potential in him and they brought him back to the monastery. I really liked that they just brought him back. I think it was such a really good little aspect to bring in, and just really did feel cool when you notice the build up going through Season 2 Part 2. But that actually does lead us through onto Season 3. Season 3 Part 1 showed Frak with the main ninja team going along for the adventure of the main story. We get to see Frak training, we get to see him utilize his elemental abilities, we get to see him just interact with the people around him. There was an element of arrogance to him, he was very firm in his ways, and he was definitely still reminiscent of Raz's teachings, and it definitely did rub certain characters the wrong way, mainly Sora. But we got to see Frak genuinely trying his best. But the thing is that in Season 3 Part 1, it felt like there was just something missing when it did come to Frak. Season 3 as a whole was definitely a very packed season, and it's one of the main complaints about that season as a whole. You have everything going on with Aaron and Raz, you have the Rogue storyline, you have the Forbidden Five, you have Thunderfang, you have the Ninja, you have Zane, you have Pixel. You have so many aspects, especially within Part 1, that I just don't think they were able to juggle correctly. And the consequence of that was Frak. Whilst Frak did have scenes and whilst he did have little moments, he just didn't really get a whole lot to shine this time round. He barely got anything of that. His main interactions was just talking about how it was cool to be with the ninja team and how he needed to get better, and how he was manipulated by Raz and he needed to get away from those teachings. It was just very surface level, and he felt almost a little stagnant by this point in time. And I definitely did feel that, to the point where I was wondering why they even had Frak. There was a real part of me that was just wondering why they were wasting screen time on a character that just wasn't really getting much. One of my main thoughts, and I think I said this at the time the season released, was why bring in Frak if you're not going to do anything with him? That was just one of the biggest aspects for me. And I think one of the other bigger ones for me is that I completely assumed that Frak was going to have more interactions with Cole specifically. We don't see Cole at all in Season 3 Part 1. He is completely absent. And it just felt extremely strange because it did feel like they were setting up a dynamic between the two. Having similar elemental powers definitely would have had some interesting bounce off like it implied in Season 2 Part 2. But we just didn't get any of that. They had no sort of attempt to do much with Frak in the season. The only good thing about him was that really good outfit that I hope that we get to see in minifigure form one day. But that actually did lead us on into Season 3 Part 2, where it actually did feel like he was getting more. We got to see him interact with Cole and Kai. They had essentially a B plot where they went to the Land of Lost Things to train Frak in his own elemental abilities. But I was completely fine with this because we actually got to see him interacting with Cole. We got to see them actually have these fun little moments with each other, and I just think it was nice to see. It felt like there was actually some development going on because we actually saw some chemistry when it did come to Frak. Not to mention then, we also got to see him take part in the whole thing with the Source Dragon. We get to see him help lift the Source Dragon from the ground. That's also a really cool scene. Whilst it didn't do too much for his character, it was at least something for him. All of that then culminates in the beginning of the final plot when it did come to Season 3 Part 2. We get to see Frak go and get reveal blades to take on Spectral Dragonians. We get to see him have some really cool fight scenes, and then we get to see him join Sora, Wildfire, and Ryu when it did come to the final battle in Awakening the Archdragon of Focus. He did get his moments to shine, and it did seem like he was having something, which I'll get onto in a second, but again, for the most part, it just felt like he was almost along for the ride. That one thing he got was a scene that implied that he had a massive crush on Sora. Well, I say implied, it was kind of obvious. But the thing is that the only thing we got was a very vague setup to a romance plot point that we have had no implication on really before. He's had the odd little comment where he called Sora cute, or he said that he missed her, but it did really feel out of nowhere, and a lot of people were commenting on the fact that it did just feel like it was a really strange addition, and I just don't really think anyone really liked it. But again, it just left this feeling of come towards the end of Season 3 Part 2, Frak went 2 whole parts where he just didn't really actually have much. It felt like he just wasn't going anywhere. And again, I was thoroughly questioning what he was actually doing in this scenario. Why was he sticking around if they weren't going to actually do anything with him? It just never really made a lot of sense, but it now actually does seem to be that they're doing it. Because we now come on to Season 4, where we actually get to see Frak have some moments to shine even before the main part of his plot points. When they're within the realm of Eternal Dawn, we actually get to see him have some moments of authority. We get to see him actually be quite smart in combat. And whilst that isn't a lot and on the level of Season 3, it was at least cool to actually have more moments where he could shine. But it definitely wasn't until they reached Umbra Sylvis where he actually really did get his moments. And that is because they decided to introduce Frak's father, and we got to see how they interact with each other. We get to see how Frak's dad talks down at him, insults him, belittles him, doesn't really think much of him at all. He doesn't really care for his son, and debatably doesn't even love him, because we actually get scenes where he admits that he has basically been talking about his own son behind his back in a very negative sense. So it really gets to see that Frak just didn't really have a good father figure. But that one little bit of detail retroactively makes everything else make so much more sense. Everything that we have seen in Season 2 and Season 3 works in context of his relationship with his father. Frak very much wanted to impress his dad. He wanted to show that he was a ninja, that he was this big hero now. He had elemental powers. He had all of these cool things. So surely his father should be proud of him. And that is very much reflected in everything that he does. In Season 2 Part 2, instead of relying on a wolf mask, Frak believes that he can win the fight on his own merit. He believes that he can beat out Sora and be the best fighter and win fairly. Ultimately he doesn't, but it's a belief that he has to prove himself, like how he does with his father. Season 3 Part 1, where Frak is relying on the things that he learned from Raz, and instead of just adapting to the ninja way, we get to see him remark at the fact that he's just so embedded in these techniques and he's just trying his best to shake them. Again, very reminiscent of his father. It's almost like how when his father says something, Frak believes it. It's like Raz became a father figure to Frak. And that is really twisted if you think about it, but it does make complete sense. And then, like I said, it's reflected in the fact that Frak isn't really willing to let go of Raz's teachings immediately. And Season 3 Part 2, again, we get to see Frak constantly proving that he's this big, fierce combatant and he's one of the best warriors. But one thing I haven't mentioned yet is when we think about the melody to awaken the Archdragon of Focus. We get to see Sora remind Frak and Wildfire about the melody in of itself so they don't forget. And Frak, who wasn't there to actually hear it for himself, believes that he is the right one even though he is disagreeing with Sora. He just has this constant belief that he is right and that he is completely infallible in this moment. Again, very much reminding you of Frak's father. You realize that all of the instances of Frak's father talking down to him, all the instances of him belittling him, insulting him, reflects in the way that Frak fights. It reflects in the way that Frak behaves and how he makes decisions. And Frak's father's big belief that he's always right, his high ego, his honestly just complete and utter pedestal that he's putting him on is again reflected in the decisions that Frak makes. When Frak believes that he could potentially be wrong, he denies it, and he constantly believes that he is truly the one that's right. It is night and day, complete mirrors of the two. You realize how much of an influence he truly did have on Frak. And when you take all of this into account and you go back to one of the things that I said at the very beginning of the video, which is trying to understand Frak, you realize that when you take all of the aspects of Frak's father and you apply them to how Frak acts throughout Ninjago, you realize that it's not random. You realize that it's not just some really weird behaviors that come out of nowhere, and it's not him just being sidelined or just having strange characterization. You realize that Frak is a product of his family upbringing. You realize that Frak is just someone who is a byproduct of his childhood. And in a way, it's quite sad because you realize that Frak is this really positive, really upbeat, morally good, pure-hearted spirit, and he's almost been tainted by his childhood. It is a massive shame, and I do not have the qualifications to comment on child psychology. But the thing is that it really does feel like Frak is the byproduct of his surroundings, which is just really interesting, and honestly just gives me a new appreciation for his character. In the end though, luckily Frak does actually have a heart-to-heart with his father. His father explains why he treated him the way he did, why he acts how he does, why he has to make his way in his world that he has. It's really interesting to see, and it does show that Frak's dad definitely does have some level of remorse, and they have implied that he wants some form of redemption. I know a lot of Ninjago fans don't want to see it because of how he's acted, and I completely understand that. But if that's the direction that the Ninjago writers go down, I hope they're delicate with it, but I do think there is definitely some potential when it does come down to it. Because I do think on an overall, this characterization and this explanation on Frak as a character is truly something to be mesmerized. It's truly a very delicate and a very good way to go about a character with this type of trauma by all accounts. I think it's a really good way to angle the character and, like I said, explain so many decisions he does make throughout the course of the show. I love this, and it's just given me a whole new appreciation when it does come to Frak. I do want to go through Frak's father in another video one day, so please be tuned for that. I have gone through him briefly here, but I do think there's definitely a lot more to him as well. But I do think as of now, in terms of his father, and also for Frak in general, I think I want to leave it there. Because I've gone over some very important things about him, and I do think I just have a new understanding when it does come to him now. But this is where I want to pass it off to you guys. What do you think of Frak as a character? Do you like the things that you can take from Season 4 and apply to the seasons before? What do you think of his relationship and his dynamic with his father? What do you want to see with Frak and his family moving forth? There are so many things to do with him, and I hope that they keep up this momentum. Because if this season is anything to go by, I am really excited to see more of Frak in the future. I am hoping for so much more when it comes to this character, and I really do think they've set things up. I haven't mentioned his relationship with Sora, that's because I just don't really want to, but again, if that's the route they want to go down then fair enough, I will see whatever they want to tell. But yeah, Apart from all of that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people, and if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Each of you are absolute legends, and your support truly does mean the world to me. But like I said, that is about it for today, and take care. Okay, bye!